Here comes the boom, fellas.
Boom. What's
We're
up,
gonna
guys?
we're gonna start this show off hot, just like Dynamite did. We're not gonna do any sort of crazy introduction. We're just gonna dive right in.
I like it.
Watching the show, I will be honest with you. Watching the show, fellas, um, I was shocked that going into the card that this show started off with Darby Allin versus Ricky Starks. Leading into this week's show, Darby Allin, Ricky Starks. That was to me one of the highlights of this card. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like that was the type of feud that really pitted two young studs against each other. Guys that are really AEW unique, and it was surprising to see the show start off with those two. What are your guys' thoughts on the way that show started, and overall on Darby Allin versus Ricky Starks, one of the hotter feuds in AEW in the last couple months?
For sure. Go for it, Sean. Take it off.
Personally, I think this should have been highlighted as a main event. The build on this was so good leading up to a few weeks ago. I really think, sadly, AEW dropped the ball on these two guys' momentum. Two great wrestlers, stars, great characters overall. This could and should have been a main event style match and ended on a high note. But overall, it's nice to finally see Darby, prevail and on top. And the little teaser with we'll talk about next week, but with the Hobbs and Cage thing, I think that will be great moving forward. But it was a long awaited, and I was very excited for it, but I was just a little disappointed from a build perspective that they didn't take advantage of this on a pay-per-view perspective as like a coffin match or like some kind of hardcore match, because they've been doing some crazy dangerous spots. And then all of a sudden it's just an opener, which is an opener is a key spot on the card, of course, but it just, I don't know, it missed the mark a little bit to me.
Yeah, I would say disappointment is something that kind of is a cloud hanging over Darby Allin right now. To be honest with you, that's a word that is certainly associated with that guy's career up to this point.
Sure.
And I think that to being honest, Sean, that was one of my takeaways too. I felt that the match ended really abruptly. The coffin drop is one of those types of finishers that can kind of come out of nowhere. So I understand that. But in the end, one of my key notes that I took away from it is, for such a hot feud between two young stars that was violent. I think all of us will say that the thumbtacks on the skateboard, that was one of the more memorable moments in recent AEW history. I just felt like this could have been a matchup that cemented both of these guys as young, bankable stars. And if they would have gone all in, so to speak, like you said, Sean, on this feud and put them in a feature spot on a pay-per-view, it certainly could have gone a long way in saying, hey, we as a company believe in these guys and we want to focus them a little bit more. And I think that there's a lot of disappointment. To go back to that word, there's a lot of disappointment in how AEW has handled Darby Allin. And Nate, I'm going to let you jump in here because out of all three of us, you are the Darby Allin fanboy, and I know that you've been disappointed in sort of how this has gone, especially when you look at the segment that led up to the match. Right? They cut to a segment and they talk about one of the notes that I had in here. Right, is they emphasize that it's going to take more than anything that we've seen thus far to stop Darby Allin, right? We've seen him put in a body bag. We've seen Brian Cage literally just treat him like a rag doll and throw him into ladders. And for this just to sort of really be, while competitive and fast-paced, but for it to sort of be a technical standard wrestling match on a Dynamite, it just did not feel like it paid off the feud, in my opinion. The way it should have. Nate, what do you think before we move on?
I see everything you guys are saying. I see it a little bit differently. Like, so from my perspective, I wanted to see Darby get his his revenge here for a while. I was sick of him being a punching bag. I felt like he was starting to fall into that pattern of being like the crash test dummy, which is hard to then get out of. We've seen other people in other promotions that are like really, really great athletes that all of a sudden they can sell and that just becomes their shtick. And then you kind of lose the opportunity to like capitalize on their ability to be a winner. So I was worried about that. But for this one, like when they started with it, I was like, okay, this is exciting. This could be a pay-per-view match. And it's like, wow, this is happening right away. What's the rest of the card going to be like? I was like, this is going to be pretty wild. I think what happened, I don't know if you guys caught this, but right before he did the coffin drop, I think there was a spot at the turnbuckle that didn't happen. I think that there was a big move that like kind of went awry and they made like they called an audible. I could be wrong, but this is kind of my perspective because it did seem like it kind of like ended abruptly and standard, right? Considering everything that they went through before.
Yeah.
So that was my take on it. In my opinion, they're going to like trade wins here and then probably have that big, like, it's going to like rebuild up to this level of chaos. But yeah, it was a little bit more like standard than you'd expect because of all the chaos that happened before with the body bag and the skateboard and so I don't know. It was a little weird, but I really think maybe that spot that was missed was like something insane that they just like were having like footing issues because it is outdoors and they did document that was like a challenge for like several things along the way. So
the elements certainly played a role, and you know, JR and the team on the commentary booth did do a good job of pointing that out. You know, the humidity and the heat down in Florida, you know, causing problems for the wrestlers, and that certainly reared its ugly head later on in the show. When we have young guys who are in great shape like this, it didn't impact the match as much. One of the things I'm going to say before we move on, I feel like Ricky Starks, I know that Darby Allin has a lot of fans because of how unique he is. One of the things that I took away from this match and this feud, really, Ricky Starks is a guy with real upside. I think this guy, he's a pro's pro. When you watch him in the ring, his facial expressions are always on point. He knows how to sell. And I think that he's the type of guy who could work with anybody. The guy oozes charisma. I'm a big fan of Ricky Starks. I think that he's got a lot of upside down the road.
I agree, man. I mean, I didn't really think about kind of like the trading wins, Nate, but as you talk about it, I could totally see, and both guys would be totally deserving to have the next cage match. You know, what do you think about that? And Darby doing some crazy spot off the top of the cage. That would really solidify him as more of a badass war versus a ragdoll crash dummy. You know, if he did that coffin drop on the top of a cage, you know, we've only seen one cage match here in AEW, and those two up-and-comers really could steal the show if it were to be a full gear cage match type of match. And, you know, overall this match, you know, we're going to give it a rating of elite or delete. And I think this is, to me, an elite match for my vote.
All right. Before I talk to you guys, I was going to say I love both guys, but my expectations were really, really high. And so I was a little bit disappointed. But now that you guys mentioned that this could be maybe rekindling, there could, you know, obviously we saw Brian Cage, Will Hobbs get involved, add a little physicality, and we know that matchup is to come. If this is, you know, a teaser for more, I'm all in. I would love to see more of these guys go at it. And I certainly think that it's a good matchup for Darby because it does allow him to have a guy who's kind of a physical equal where he won't get ragdolled as much. So I will go elite as well. Soft elite, but I will go elite.
Nice. One last thing for me too, I just thought of it. I think if possible, they had to slow roll this like chaos coming back up because Darby was like legitimately hurt with that body bag dump, right? So they kind of boxed them in. So like they want to keep the feud alive, but they can't go balls to the wall necessarily. So maybe that's what we saw tonight. Just possibility.
Yep. So, and Nate, I know you. Any Darby Allin segment, it's going to be an elite from you. But speaking of keeping a feud alive, I have to transition to the next match, the next segment of the show. Keeping a feud alive. I got to say, that Cody interview. I know everybody's really hot on Brody Lee right now, and I know that the Dark Order and especially their leader, the Exalted One, Brody Lee, is getting a lot of buzz. you see the work that he's putting on his body. The guy is getting more and more physically impressive, and he certainly is starting to get more into his look, into his presence, his persona. But I sat back and I had to stop and rewind the Cody interview just to listen. That guy on the mic, I wrote that line where he was talking about Al Snow. You will often wrestle hurt, but never wrestle injured. But what if the pain is beyond physical? What if it transcends the body? I was just Cody has a way, and it's rare in today's day and age, of recognizing that wrestling is an art form. I just thought that interview was excellent, and he played the crowd really well. If there was a live crowd there, we would have all been marking out when he turned down Brody Lee's original offer, and he said no. He came off as a broken man, and he kind of played into that. And then he came back, and then that brawl, that was one of the better segments early on. I got to say, Dynamite really started off with a bang tonight. What do you guys think about the Cody interview before we move on to my favorite segment of the night?
Yeah. So I think that what's interesting about the segment and like what he brought to the table, the quote that you gave, if you're not even a wrestling fan and you hear a guy saying that, your eyes come up to the TV. This happened. I saw my wife like all expressing such extreme like psychological vulnerability. It was rare the way he articulated it. It was awesome. It wasn't even like a wrestling promo per se. It was more just like this guy being able to like describe what he just experienced in a way. I don't know. It was different than like a traditional promo. I can't put it into words quite right, but it was like definitely not standard.
And that's what I like about Cody. He understands that this is a medium. That yes, it's a physicality based medium, right? But without the emotional drama behind it, we're not going to care. And Cody has a way of sucking in the casual fan, unlike most people in the business today. He certainly, you can tell he's learned well from Sean. I know that you were explaining this earlier when we were watching. The dusty roads. I know that Cody doesn't want to be in the shadow of his father, but you can see in moments like that when he brings in the psychological aspect of it, right? Drawing the casual fan, right? I'll let you get into that before we move on.
Yeah,
any finals?
For sure. I thought it was a Dynamite promo by all means, one of the best of the night. But the emotion, you always feel some kind of emotion with Cody's promos, and the brawl, to me, we just talked about how the first match could have been the main event and show closer. This should have been a show closer as well. When you have this brawl and just nonstop chaos, that's a way to have a show to really be on, pins and needles for next week. And I mean, we'll talk later, but next week's card is already starting to shape up really good, and any match could be the main event, and this definitely should be the main event. And the constant brawling, and Brody going back 3 different times, it was at least that, it was just great. I think it was awesome. And I know you guys, I got this graphic that I saw, and I don't think you guys have seen it yet, but it's a really cool graphic that I want you guys to see. That I'm going to play up. But yeah, I can't wait for next week's Dynamite when these two guys are going to be going to battle. And I honestly don't know who's going to win. I mean, I don't want to see Brody, take away his title, but Cody's got to ride the train and the momentum.
I see black Mayan, brother.
Here we go.
All right.
I want you guys' initial reaction. Look at this graphic.
Oh, I saw that.
Oh, damn. That is awesome.
How cool is that?
Super cool.
That logo with the Dark Order logo,
that looks like a Mortal Kombat like arcade top, like, right? Or like Street Fighter almost.
Wow.
This should be the main event by far. This should end a pay-per-view.
This is certainly, with the backstory behind it, the physicality behind it, both, like you said, Sean, Brody Lee is probably the hottest guy in the company. Cody did a nice job of giving props to his opponent, which is something that is a lost art in today's day and age. Making your opponent actually a worthwhile, credible opponent. Brody is on fire. Do you bring Cody back and do you have him lose? I don't know. The dog collar will add a level of physicality to next week's matchup that will certainly favor Brody Lee. And it might give us an out and certainly lead to another option, another opportunity down the road that might favor Cody to get his revenge, right? This might be one of those feuds that they slow play for a little bit.
The dog collar freaks me out a little bit. Like, you can't really practice that too much. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have very many reps with this. So it's like, I'm a little surprised off the, like, Matt Hardy and like some guys testing positive, like COVID, and some things that have like put people on the shelf temporarily, that they're going to put two of the main dudes with this dog collar stipulate. It's a risk, but that's what I like about AEW is they take these chances, you know, and I'm sure they're going to make it as safe as possible, but it kind of freaks me out, which I think is the draw. Like, I'll be watching, but like kind of on the edge of my seat. Like, I hope these guys don't, you know.
All right, for sure.
I think the over/under on whether or not, I mean, the blood will be shed in that match. Cody's well known for showing a little red, a little color. I got to think that's going to happen. But Nate, you talk about physicality, and I think that one of the things that with the next segment with my favorite act in AEW right now, FTR, going into that match, there was a lot of – this is sort of the opposite of the Brody Lee versus Cody. There was not a lot of steam behind the FTR brush with greatness challenge, right? I listened to last week's podcast before I was able to join you guys. You guys were just putting delete all over that, and rightfully so. I don't think it was a coincidence that they didn't have Tully talk during that promo backstage. And quite honestly, Cash and Dax proved that they didn't really need it. They didn't really need the help from Tully. That promo that they cut against the Best Friends was truly awesome. Jim Cornette had to just be sitting back, giving a little round of applause, because when they talked about being the pinnacle of tag team wrestling, and that the Best Friends are glorified backyard wrestlers who are more participation trophy guys, I was loving it. I was eating it up. And then Dax going into the Young Bucks, just continuously blowing every opportunity after opportunity. Yeah. And the only thing that they're good at is getting Dave Meltzer props. I just thought that was really well done. And then SCU's promo was the epitome of a dud for me.
Weenies.
You may be playing checkers, but we are playing chess line by Kaz was as overplayed as possible. My favorite part about that segment, and I don't know about you guys, was just seeing Sean Spears on Dynamite. What do you guys think about that?
Yep. Go ahead, Sean. I keep taking these from Mike. Go ahead.
We'll go back and forth.
Manners.
I got this one. You start next one.
I don't want this to be like the freaking presidential debate. We're going to be civil.
All right. Hey, Sean, what are your thoughts on the FTR versus SCU segment and match?
So let's Jericho in the inner circle and the MJ. But anyways, the Sean Spears tease has been going on, and the Hangman tease, which we've been talking about, a possible, new faction with those Horsemen. I'm all for it. It's a very, very, very slow turtle crawl build. If and when that happens, I think that is definitely money right there. Those four. I think Sean Spears deserves to be on TV, but the roster's crowded, as we talked about it. But it is nice to have those little Easter eggs all throughout. Like, honestly, the Hangman Page on commentary wasn't necessary, but it's kind of a little Easter egg. What happened at the end of the match as well, when they announced that 8-man tag tournament, or the 8-man tournament. But the Spears, it is nice. So I hope there is still those builds, and it comes to a conclusion where there is a new faction with those four guys plus Tully.
The timing of it, and I'll let Nate jump in, but the timing of it was really well played from a storyline standpoint, right? You have SCU cut that promo and they're walking to the ring. Shawn Spears wishes them luck, kind of in a coy way, and then boom, you see Hangman Page at the commentary booth, right? So there certainly is some layers being played there, Sean, where you can start to see, okay, Spears is managed by Tully. Hangman clearly has a history with FTR. Maybe they're doing something there, and that is an interesting thing to me. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, so like the way I took the good luck was kind of like, you guys can't win because we have this thing surrounded. We're better in the ring, but we have Hangman's over here. I'm chilling right here. Like it made it, to me, it was like this thing's on lockdown. You guys just don't know what's going on. So that was cool. I like that a lot. I feel like there's something though with this like 4 horsemen concept that people have been like throwing around, or there's something like off about it. Like there's a swerve here and I don't know what it is, but there's so many like different wrinkles to it. I think something's gonna be a surprise, right? It makes sense that like it's Hangman and it's Spears and it's Tully and it's FDR, but that's just like too linear for this long of a period of time to go by before seeing it. So I think there's something that's gonna happen, or one guy's gonna change his mind or something. Like maybe that was the plan, and like Hangman just like decides no, or I don't know, something goofy. But
you can definitely tell that Hangman is doing a good job right now of playing the conflicted. He's a good guy at heart, and you can tell he's definitely conflicted as to what his future holds. Right, he's still tending to want to cling towards the tag team of him and Omega, whereas Omega last week in the commentary role made it very, very clear that he's ready to go singles. And as such, he was announced as one of the men in the 8-man tag, or the 8-man world title tournament that Sean mentioned. Before we move on to the next segment, we talked about the promos that led to the match. Talking about the match, I don't want to get too involved in it. Elite or delete in this match. I know that Sean, you're not the biggest SCU fan in the world. Maybe that's because you don't have a lot of experience of seeing Frankie Kazarian during his prime at TNA, and Christopher Daniels, who is a legend. But what do you think? I mean, this is ultimately for me a big judge for somebody who doesn't love SCU. Elite or delete, Sean?
I delete. Elite.
You guys, of course, I'm not shocked that you didn't like this segment or this match. What I'm going to say is the only guy who rated it as an elite, I have to say that FTR is so good at the little things. They just have a way, and Paige pointed this out during commentary, FTR are great wrestlers, but they're even better manipulators. And I think that gets lost in today's wrestling is you don't always have to be the most exciting in the ring. It's about that story. It's about getting heat on yourself. It's about making sure that the fans want the other team to get the win. They do such a great job of cutting off the ring, isolating their opponents, playing the crowd. I was cracking up when Cash faked when Christopher Daniels interfered. I was cracking up, and it wasn't just the bourbon. I loved it. It was so good. So
that was funny. I'll give him props for that.
Okay, this was really funny to me, I will say. This was elite for me because I don't think I've ever seen it, but the idea that a Southern man in Kazarian slapped a Southern man in Dax on the butt as a way to antagonize him, I don't think I've ever seen it before, so it cracked me up because it worked, and it was like, I feel like that should be a move more, even in in video games. If up left,
him up a little bit.
The old baseball coach smackaroo.
All right, well, I don't know if there's any way of segueing out of that, man, but FTR won that match. The SCU got the brush with greatness of the best tag team in the whole world, and they won using their smarts. But transitioning out of that, Sean, we talked about that 8-man tournament for the world title shot, and that was announced right after this match. The first 3 contenders Jungle Boy, Ray Phoenix, and Kenny Omega. Certainly interesting that those are the 3 first men announced. Kenny Omega certainly has to be one of the favorites for that world title shot. Are there any characters or people on this show that you guys are hoping get announced for that 8-man tournament that were not announced thus far?
I mean, if Kenny can't lose, and then he can't lose if he gets a title shot. So if he's going to be the next champ, I think that's great. You know, that would still give months to build. It just seems, unless, you know, Hangman cost him or something like that, but for Kenny to lose would be very shocking. I would like to see Wardlow in there, or even you know, someone like that. That would be my one pick, I guess.
That's
okay. Wardlow's a great pick.
I'm gonna probably steal these words from your mouth, or the word from your mouth, Mike. But seeing Pac come back for like that would be awesome. But no announcement. Just keep it like.
Fill my heart.
Right now, let's say he's self-quarantining somewhere in a hotel, like, you know, doing his thing. Like I don't know if you, yeah, I was like thinking maybe tonight that he'd like make an appearance during this open challenge, like, and be part of that death triangle with Eddie Kingston. I really did think that. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. I guess Pac is for me.
That hey Nate, I would love that. That would literally be the best thing ever, and it would certainly be a guy who, you know, Sean says Kenny Omega can't lose this tournament, right? Pac has beaten Kenny. They have a long history together. Their feud was pure fire. For anybody who wants to go back and watch one of the more memorable feuds of AEW, I know the company is still in its infancy, but Pac versus Omega was one of the better feuds of AEW's history thus far. That would be awesome, and that would be a guy, and instantaneously that could be a guy, Nate. That would be a great way to bring him back after a long break.
Or not to derail us, imagine Omega Cowboy in the finals then, after all they've been through. Holy smokes, that would be
that'd be great. I would love it.
That was going to be. I mean, I'm not as big of a Hangman Page fan as some people are. I do think that he's got a lot of upside, and he's certainly doing a great job with this character. But I think that would be a perfect blow up for this kind of teaser that they had. You know, Kenny didn't quite snap on Page after their match and their loss of their tag titles. That would be a really great culmination of the tournament. And both two guys that, you know, Kenny or Page getting a title shot would be great. I mean, Hangman Page just recently had a lot of conversation about how he had his world title shot against Jericho and he didn't feel like he was ready. He didn't feel like he deserved it. And he lost. He came up short. And that would certainly be an awesome redemption story. So the guy that he lost that title match to, Jericho, was involved in a match with Isaiah Cassidy tonight. I'm gonna step back and let you guys take the lead on this one. Nate, what are your thoughts on the Jericho versus Cassidy? Because I have a lot of stuff inside that I felt about this match, and I could probably have a whole podcast about this segment and the trajectory of where I see things going. So go ahead, Nate. What do you think?
Real quick, I don't know. I felt like nervous for Jericho after the first like minute or two, just like the young youth of Isaiah and like the inexperience. And then Jericho was clearly trying to take like more bumps than normal. And it was like, I was like, oh man, like, I don't know. Every time something happened to Jericho, I felt like my grandpa fell down kind of. And like, I don't like that feeling. Like I like to feel like my grandpa's protected. So I like him to be in there with another grandpa who's like been in the nursing home for way longer and like knows everything about it, every slippery patch of ice outside, you know, like, and this didn't feel like that. So I was like nervous that it was way premature here. And it's like, he's going with like in my opinion, one of the greatest of all time with Jericho. So it went long enough to be like confusing. It made Jericho like look like that grandpa instead of Isaiah looking like that star. And I don't think that's a good look, especially on like short notice. So that's a no for me, dog, all around. But things that happened afterwards were interesting. And then like other stuff after the match. I'll let you talk about those. But Yeah, it was a no. It was a no on my end.
I mean, I hear you. I don't think it should have been a 2-segment match, in my opinion. I'm all for Jericho helping the younger guys and establishing the roster in a strong, complete roster, as you can say. But I don't think Cassidy is deserving of that one-on-one spot yet. I like Private Party, and I think they have some great potential overall. But the one-on-one, for him to get so many near falls on Jericho, I think that really hurts Jericho in a sense. And he was taking those crazy bumps when he went and fell on the apron. I was a little bit nervous, but it is, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, does the Luther deserve a shot? And Serpentino, like, probably not on Dynamite, which they're going to get next week. But what I do like, because, digging deeper into Jericho as a person, that he's supporting his friend Luther, who has been on a grind, the independent grind, kind of like Eddie Kingston, and getting this shot. And so Jericho's going to give him that shot on TV, give him his like TV debut. So that part I like. But if you're going to do that, you need to stand tall and stand strong, do a few bumps, but don't risk it all. And you need to be established that you're the big dog on the yard.
Yeah, that was. I mean, you guys both. I'm glad that I wasn't just the old man yelling at the cloud. I was so irritated with the way this match went, and it's really been a pattern lately with Jericho. And I understand the role of a veteran trying to get young guys over. I get that, but it becomes cheapened when you're seeing that over and over and over again. To me, who is the top heel in AEW? To me, it's been Jericho. And he's definitely the most marketable and recognizable star. And when you have him going in and struggling against a tag team specialist, somebody like Cassidy, who is incredible. I mean, to me, Isaiah Cassidy is the weak link of Private Party. And Private Party is an incredibly green, new tag team. And yes, they have a lot of upside, don't get me wrong. But for him to – literally Cassidy dominated that entire match. I was watching the whole thing, and it was like, what are they thinking here? I'm a big AEW fan, but in my opinion, this match should have been Jericho beating the shit out of Cassidy, and Cassidy should have had those quick flash offenses, those close pins. He could have had a couple, spots that made you think he could have snuck a win over Jericho. But instead, it was Jericho literally taking all this dude's offense, which, Nate, as you mentioned, when you have a young guy who's green but capable of being fast and athletic and things like that, and you have an older guy who relies on kind of a little bit more timing, a little bit more working the pace of a match, Jericho was exposed. He looked bad. It was no one came out looking better in this match, in my opinion. And at the end, Jericho looked like he barely got the win by hitting a sudden Judas effect against a kid who shouldn't be hanging with him. And I think the AEW needs to learn to embrace the squash match. Not every match needs to be multiple commercial breaks. Jericho should not be struggling with Cassidy the way he did. You did talk about the post-match stuff. I think that it's very fitting that Jericho is going to be facing Luther on the Jericho 30th anniversary celebration, considering Luther is basically in this company because he's friends with Jericho. I think that works really well. And it does give TV time to a guy who doesn't get TV time. Not to say that I know much about Chaos Project. I've seen them on Dark. I don't know if they're a believable challenge to, Jericho and Hager. To me, this match was by far the biggest delete of the night. What do you guys say?
Wow. I mean, for the overall segment, the second part, I would give it an elite just because of I was happy the Inner Circle was ringside.
I love the Inner
chaos.
Circle.
And then we had extra people, Hardy, whatever. And just the chaos it caused post-match to kind of give you more to the story. A lot of matches and a lot of things are like, okay, like going into this, I was like, this is pointless. They fought 2 weeks ago. They're having a one-on-one. where are you going with this? But then you draw that story at the end of it to kind of be like, okay, then there's something next week. That's the only reason I'm giving it the elite. Other than that, the overall match to me was a delete, sadly. And Jericho is my favorite.
Yeah, big delete for me. I don't understand why they didn't just like run it back tag wise and then let the tag team, let Private Party get one over on Hager and Jericho that way. It doesn't make Jericho look like a goofball, like almost losing to this kid, but like, you know, you can get creative in the tag environment and it's not like it depletes someone's stock too much. But yeah, this was a weird one for me. Like I said, I was like literally like, oh no, like get up, Jericho, like come on, like no. When he did the move off the top rope, I thought he landed like flush against his chest. I was like, oh no, like that's not gonna be good. He's gonna be in a t-shirt for 4 weeks or something.
Right.
It was brutal, man. It was brutal to watch. And to me, I just Jericho is better than that. That's at the end of the day, he's better than that. I understand what he did with Orange Cassidy. I get it.
Yep.
And that's because Orange Cassidy does have some marketability and does have the ability to be a star. I don't know if he'll ever be a world champion in that regard, right? I think that his character has a certain ceiling, but he has certainly established Orange Cassidy as somebody who can go, right? I think that the more you do this, you are going to hurt a guy who is a legend in his established. You know, I just, to me, watching one of the greatest of all time and a legit MMA beast struggle against teams like Sonny Kiss, Joey Janela, Jericho struggling against Isaiah Cassidy. It was disappointing. That said, it picks up very quickly after that, and I think that we can continue to move forward with the next segment, which again featured the best tag team in the world. We'll get to that in the next portion of this podcast.
I'm recording, and then once that screen pops up, Mike, I'm going to start with it, and then once it goes away, then you start talking, okay?
Okay.
Technology is taking forever. All right,
you weenies.
Next up, what's the next match?
Well, yeah, and to me, this is this is where I just want to touch on FTR again because they had that segment with the best friends, which is going to get into next week's match. This goes again to why I love FTR. They talked about in this, they talk trash to their best friends. They talk about tears, how they're the top guys and the best friends, being a comedy act, eating their cookies in their mommy's soccer van. I love that. That there's a spot for them on the card, kind of in the mid card. I thought that whole segment was really funny, and quite frankly, the weenies comment from OC was great. That's going to be something that will linger on with jokes going forward. That segued into Orange Cassidy versus Press 10 from the Dark Order. I'm struggling to understand what's going on. Clearly, I know that they're going to try to transition best friends away from that feud with the Inner Circle, Santana and Ortiz, and Orange Cassidy versus Jericho, which is good. So this is obviously where they're going. But does this lead to a full-fledged feud between the best friends and Orange Cassidy versus the Dark Order, or what? This next match clearly was a follow-up after we saw Orange Cassidy just get brutalized by Brody last week. What's your guys' take on where this feud is going, if that is the case? And what was your thoughts on this match?
Yeah, I think it's like two things. I think once you get Cassidy over after winning against Jericho, but then he loses for the TNT championship, then you just got to like feed him some wins, right? So like this one just made sense. Like, okay, it connects to that storyline. I think the feeding him some wins is probably going to continue and not necessarily like lead to feuds. So I don't know how far we can look into it, but him being in the trunk of the car for the brawl definitely like is an easy thing to like tie back to. Whether that, it'll be interesting to see like where this goes. So he's kind of like feuding with everybody, right? He's like feuding with Inner Circle, but like Dark Order too. It's like he can kind of, I don't know. Everyone wants Cassidy to, try or quit having so much success without trying. I think is the problem they have without it, right? Like we're trying so hard and you're barely trying, and now you're doing good. This is annoying, but
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Cassie's kind of in a funk right now. I mean, there's not many top baby faces that are on the card consistently, and he might be the top one at the moment. Minus Cody's re-debut. So I don't know where it goes from here. Honestly, like, best friends will eventually get their shot at FTR, which is fine. And I like that, undercutting that FTR is doing to the best friends. But Cassidy, I'm fine with him getting a couple of those wins and just kind of patting his stats and then finding something more solid. After you go from getting an ass whooping from Brody and then taking the 2 out of 3 of Jericho, like, you're a solid star right now. You got some momentum.
Yeah, and I think, like, I've been very much I've been slow to get onto the Dark Order train. I know that everybody loves them online. I think that they certainly they bring what I felt when I watched this match, because first my reaction was, where's this going? Why is this even on the show? This is a total piss break of a match. And then I stopped back and I started to think about the Dark Order, and really the best content that the Dark Order has to offer is on Being the Elite, right? And so I started thinking, well, this played off of John Silver's history with Orange Cassidy on Being the Elite, right? Where Orange Cassidy moves the water bottle off the table. Those two have been interacting quite a bit on Being the Elite. When Orange Cassidy judged the dance off, there's lots of great comedy content that has to do with John Silver and the Dark Order and Orange Cassidy that hasn't necessarily been tied into Dynamite yet. So if they are trying to build something with the best friends in Dark Order, there's certainly something that could be there. There's comedic talent with Orange Cassidy and John Silver. There's something interesting about maybe having Orange Cassidy, like Nate talked about, go on a series of wins against some of these guys in the Dark Order that are kind of not really featured on the show, right? Maybe John Silver gets a match, right? Maybe he gets a match against Orange Cassidy. I think that'd be interesting, right? And then in that regard, you get an opportunity where John Silver gets TV time in a match where his size isn't such a discrepancy against most of the guys on the card. Orange Cassidy's a smaller guy. It'd be interesting anyway.
He can work, man. He can freaking work. He's so strong. I've seen some crazy stuff online. So, like, he's one of those, like, sleepers in that way. Like, show him off as a comedian, and then, whoa, he can, like, suplex anybody kind of guy. It's like, all right, I'm into that.
Exactly. Maybe this is an opportunity for Orange Cassidy to pay it forward. The rub that he got from Jericho, maybe he can do the same for a guy like John Silver, who really, people who are diehard fans of AEW, they're rooting for John Silver to get some more TV time. This guy clearly is somebody who gets it. He's an entertainer.
Nate, what's your initials for him? BBBABM or what?
Oh, I mean, he's got a lot of great quotes out there, on Being the Elite. But my favorite one ever was, if we don't get some more recruits here ASAP, Mr. Brody said he's gonna spank our bare butts back and balls. And then
put that on a shirt.
Reynolds
and then the pro wrestling tees.
Reynolds was like, he didn't say that, and he was like, he said something like that, and it's like, well, that's a big deal. They're like, you can't mix a quote up like that, Silver. Like, we need.
Yeah, they are funny. And again, I was slow to warm to the Dark Order. I'm still not ready to pledge my allegiance to them, but I do have to say that they are funny, and John Silver is by far my favorite guy in the whole group. So, so going from that comedy Orange Cassidy, John Silver, all that, right, of that match. Into the next segment. Well, before we move on, elite or delete on that match before we move forward, guys. I don't know about you guys. I know it wasn't a serious match, but
I'll call it elite. Like, I think it did what it needed to do, No reason to delete it for me. It was just like, yeah.
I agree. I'm going to go elite for sure, just because it's solidified. It's a rebound match, and it almost makes you forget a little bit about the ass whooping that Brody Lee gave him. Even though it wasn't really an ass whooping, OC had some good moments, but elite for me.
Yeah. Again, I was at the beginning. I was like, "What is this? Why is this even on the show?" But at the end, it served its purpose. Orange Cassidy certainly was. I think that he needed to win again after last week, so I'll give it an elite. I'll give it an Orange Cassidy elite. All right, so we had some laughs in that last match, in that last segment. We recognize that comedy is certainly a part of AEW's presentation. To me, this next segment with MJF and the Inner Circle, those guys, that is just pure gold. Nate, I know that you've talked about this. This feels like nostalgic in a sense that there are very few guys in the modern era who just have a natural – they just feel comfortable on screen, and they just naturally feel like they are hilarious without even trying. Jeff and Jericho, it felt like The Rock and Jericho. It just feels like that. That segment was really interesting, not just from a comedy standpoint, but also I think from maybe I'm reading into things a little bit more than I should be, but I think that they were planting some seeds of discontent in the Inner Circle with the Sammy kind of getting slighted a little bit. What do you guys think?
I hope they're planting seeds. I mean, there's so many times that I feel like we get these awesome promos, and it's just, where does it go from it? We as fans are hoping for these extra little tidbits and Easter eggs. So it could lead to something, and I really hope it does, because that whole group that is on camera right there is money and gold, in my opinion.
Nate?
Yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought on this one. I think I felt bad that I talked over you. I felt like I was doing the debate thing again. I was like, man, they're going to spank my bare butt back or balls.
Do I need to be Chris Wallace here, bud? Come on. Go ahead. You have your time now. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. All right. So from my perspective, like, I don't know. What were we even talking about?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in really quick. I mean, for me, the no jacket for Sammy, the tension that was starting to get played there only got amplified at the end when, again, Sammy went to call MJF a loser when he walks out the door, and Jericho cuts him off and tells him maybe he's not so bad, right? There could be some interesting thing there, and maybe this is where MJF, being the sleazeball that MJF is, maybe this is where he starts to break down the Inner Circle from within. I don't know. It's certainly interesting. Anytime the Inner Circle and MJF is on television, though, it's going to be good. Speaking of that, I feel the same way about a certain female wrestler, really the only female wrestler on the AEW roster that I feel like is pure gold every time she's on television. DMD, Britt Baker comes back for her in-ring debut, really in months. So it was really great to see Britt Baker on television again. For me, no woman in the company has the personality and charisma that Baker has. I know that she's not a finished product. She's still young and new to the business. But that girl knows how to play to a camera. She just, to me, she looks, she feels, she acts like a star. And that's really sorely missing in AEW's women's division. When I look at obviously Sheeta is very talented in the ring, but she has a lot of limitations when it comes to personality. I don't really see anybody on the AEW women's roster who is the complete package like Britt Baker. It was nice to see her get a nice squash win against Red Velvet, who is now 0-8. So it was a convincing win. She gave a complete beatdown afterwards. Sean, I know you were probably napping during this match. I'll go to Nate first because I don't want to go to you as the women's expert. Nate, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I thought Baker, if you didn't know she had an injury, you would never know from this match, which was like a great thing to see. For me, that's like what I was paying attention to, is like how limited will she be, because she just came off that match with Big Swole where they had to do it cinematically so they could like make sure she was able to do everything, is what I understand was going on there. So yeah, I thought she looked better than pre-injury, which is a big win. And then like just like facial expressions and like overall presentation, I feel like she owns the role right now. She's like got that like superstar kind of vibe going now. Even like the apparel and stuff that she's wearing in the ring, like the whole package is coming together now. Like she is, yeah, it's different, and it's different than as when it began. I think she's evolved a lot in a super short amount of time, and there are like actually there's a couple superstars like in different promotions that she reminds me of as like a hybrid of, and I'm not going to name them, but just like something that as a wrestling fan, I'm like, oh wow, she's kind of got these traits from a few different people that I think are good in their own right. So
yeah, very well said. Sean, do you have anything to add, or should we just move to elite and delete?
I'm just going to say that segment was a delete for me. And I'm waiting for a woman superstar on the AEW roster to wow me still. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. Well, I'm going to give it a big elite. Just seeing Britt Baker on television is good for me. So, all right. And this is going to get us to the end of the show. The main event. Eddie Kingston gets to announce Jon Moxley's world title challenger. But before he does that, he drags the referee out to the ring, and in typical Eddie Kingston fashion, he delivers hot fire on the mic. But I think what was even more impressive was that the referee was able to hang with Eddie Kingston. That segment was excellent when they talked about their history together. What do you guys think?
If it wasn't for Cody's badass promo and Eddie obviously spitting fire week in and week out, he could have won top promo of the week.
It was awesome, right, Nate?
Seen ref like speak and felt like he was speaking from the heart before. Like I believed him first. I was like, oh yeah, that is your job. Like you are supposed to protect him from stuff. Like, and people actually clapped. Like, yeah, that's right. Like you're a good ref for what you said. It was convincing.
Yeah.
Aubrey Edwards is by far the best ref in the biz, but I got a little more credential. I got a little more love for this ref right here.
Yeah.
Don't know his name, but
I was going to say we can eventually learn his name with segments like that. But what I really like what they're doing with Eddie Kingston is even at the end of this match, you can see they're playing into a guy who had a rough road to get to this point, and he is relentless and like a mad dog with a bone. He ain't gonna give it up. He's continuing to talk about how he didn't get eliminated from the battle royal. Now he never gave up, right? He never submitted. You could tell they're playing into that, which is really great to see. What do you guys think about the actual match itself, Nate? What's your takeaway as a guy who, really Jon Moxley is? Well, I'll let you go. What are your thoughts on Jon Moxley versus the Butcher, who I know you're a big Butcher fan, right?
I was excited. I got off the couch and I said, I don't know if we can say this on YouTube, but I said, beep, yeah. And I spilled some pizza on my tabletop. And my wife was like, what? And I was like, the Butcher, he's in the main event. Like, he's fighting for the belt. I never thought I would see that, let alone tonight. So I was pumped. And I thought the display of him like standing behind him, behind Mox, it gave you perspective on how big that dude is. I like his character. He reminds me of the guy, the main villain from Gangs of New York, which is a fantastic movie. That combined with like the There Will Be Blood. I don't know. He's a cool character. I like everything about him. I think there's something interesting about it. And I thought he did well for the spot he was in. Obviously it was a physical match. It was like brute versus brute is the way that they presented it. And I think there were a couple spots that were missed just from him being like semi-green compared to Mox, but I think they worked together well on it. So I was good with it.
Yeah, I mean, I loved just him appearing behind him in that apron. Like,
Yep.
yeah, you can take that for what it is. It can be comical, or it can be like, oh, this is like a scary movie type of thing. And I took it for the scary movie type of thing. I was like, this guy is like, I'm going to run. I'm scared of this guy. That stash is on point. One of the best ever, in my opinion. And it was nice to see a fresh face in the main event versus Moxley, and who has not been historically a fighting champion per se. And so for the Butcher to do that, it did seem both guys were a little winded, and in the mid part of the match, it seemed kind of slow, and a few points were missed, but whatever. Overall, I was entertained, and I was a little honestly surprised that there wasn't more of a hang, like a twist at the end. You ended the show and there was nothing. Like, okay, you can shut the TV off and be like, okay, I can go to sleep. You want a show to end where it's like, oh my gosh, what just happened? I can't wait for next week. Like, yes, next week's card is going to be outstanding, but there's nothing like where like, I need to go online, I need to read things, I need to be like, talk about all this because of the ending. And that didn't happen. That's where you can happen where like the Cody and Brody thing could have been the ending of the show and be like, holy cow, what happened? Brandy just did this flip off the whatever, and then Brody Lee came 3 times and split his suit, and like John Silver's over there, humping the ropes or whatever it may be.
Yeah. Well, really quickly, Brandy did do a flip off the turnbuckle, which was awesome for live television. She gets dogged on everywhere, and that was awesome. So
surprise me.
Brandy, you get an elite for me tonight, and she wrestled a good match recently against Anna Jay. So for as much flack as she gets for millions of reasons, like if you don't see improvement there, you're just putting your head in the sand. Anyway,
right.
I digress.
No, I think that would have been wrong not to mention that. I agree. Brandy certainly doesn't get a lot of love online from the fan base, but I was impressed. But getting back into this match, I agree with you guys. The surprise of the Butcher and the way that Eddie kind of kept John focused on him. I even think that they did a great job on social media. Pentagon teased some stuff on Instagram that he was going to be the opponent. So it was a genuine surprise. And I think AEW has done a very, very, very good job of actually having their surprises be surprises. They do a nice job of keeping those contained. I'll say the Butcher is a big, scary, nasty man. There's nothing pretty about that guy, and he's old school. He's a scary dude. I thought that the visual, like we talked about, the visual alone of him kind of stalking Moxley from behind was classic. Unfortunately, I do think the elements did get the better of them. We talked about that a little earlier on in our podcast where, you could see that the heat was starting to maybe impact some of the wrestlers. There's only so many guys. The Butcher is a big dude, man. And to be going like he was in the main event, that was hard. You could see that it was impacting him a little bit. John Moxley, Sean, you did mention he hasn't necessarily been a fighting champion week in and week out. It's nice to see him do that. I think the only issue that I'm starting to see, unfortunately, is that his matches just don't seem to be very memorable. There's not a lot of, to me, if I was to be pushed to ask what is John Moxley's best match as a champion in AEW, I would have a real hard time putting my finger on that. And so I think that there's something to be said there. The hope is that maybe this match with Lance Archer coming up does bring out more physicality and maybe puts Moxley in a position where he's the champion in peril and guys go at each other. But for me, this match, if I'm going to say the cliffhanger ending at the end, Sean, before we get into the final rating, I will say that if you saw Ed Kingston leave and go up the ramp, you could tell, again, going back to Eddie's obsession, he's not going to let this go. I have a feeling that there will be some more to this, that Eddie's going to be the thorn in Moxley's side, and that there is potential that maybe he and his crew cost Moxley the title against Lance Archer. That would be interesting and could lead to a feud for Moxley down the road with Kingston that doesn't necessarily have title implications. For me, this match, the surprise of the Butcher being in it was really great. Unfortunately, I'm going to go with it was a delete for me.
For me, it was an elite. I love the Butcher. I like that snapshot. I like that a guy that you didn't expect to be in that role was in that role, that he carried his own, that it adds to several storylines. You couldn't drop the belt before, that title match with Archer was set up. So, right, you need to find someone who is going to get the rub here. I think he was like a really unconventional selection. I would have never expected them to pick him, which I like. I like that they did something like today. If you asked, I think 100 people, Butcher would have been very low on the list. But the fact that it was still like a pretty cool presentation shows that they did a good job.
I'll give it an elite too. You just talked me into it.
Yeah, that's right.
I was on the fence. And that was a really good assessment, Nate. I agree that just the pure surprise of that was really well executed.
Can I give it? I don't know what I can give. What are we going to do? The mediocre, but the only reason
I'm with you,
mediocre because is no cliffhanger. No cliffhanger at the end. I like I spoke about. I love how he was the silhouette behind him essentially, and like the surprise. Like I would have never. Well, I guess because Eddie was announcing it, there's a slim chance of the Butcher coming out, and I would not have thought of that. I would have figured like there would have been some surprise, but definitely not Pac because it's not a pay-per-view and he's too big of a star. But because of that, I give it one of these. And I just wish there was like I just wish Eddie came in and like just did something cool, even if it was just like the camera just ended on him being pissed off, like just that. He didn't have to attack him.
See that?
No, I saw it.
Pissed off. I thought Eddie was pissed off.
I saw that too, and I'll say the cliffhanger for next week's show. I mean, dude, it's going to be Jericho Appreciation Night. It's not going to be about Moxley. It really, I mean, really, let's be honest, right? Next week's show is going to be it's not going to be about John Moxley and Eddie Kingston. It's going to be about the champion.
Right.
So let's keep that perspective. I think the AEW does a really nice job of it, of going week to week and building their shows. So, all right, to wrap things up, let's preview next week's show with the cliffhanger. Cody's going to be going against Brody Lee in a championship match, dog collar match, something we have not seen and may not see for a long, long time. So that's going to be really fascinating, and that alone is going to draw in people. And then on top of that, you're going to have Jericho 30-year celebration, a career really where I think – he's solidifying himself as one of the greatest of all time. There's no denying his ability to transform his character, to adapt to the times. That guy deserves a celebration and lots of the bubbly. The Jericho and Hager versus Chaos Project, that's going to be something interesting. We get to see Luther on television versus one of his buddies. Brian Cage versus Big Tits Hobbs. That's going to be a good one. Two big hosses going at it. So overall, your top performer of the week, Mind. I'm gonna lead out first. No doubt about it. FTR. They were featured throughout the show. They had multiple segments where I thought that they did excellent on the mic. They they recovered from last week's show, and they showed they didn't really need Tully on the mic for them. I thought they did a really, really good job showing why they are highly regarded as the best tag team in the world. Those guys know how to play the audience. They know how to get heat. They know how to give their opponent some rub, and they know how to develop psychology. I'm a big fan of what they do, and I definitely think that they carried the show throughout multiple segments of the night. Nate, your favorite?
Yeah, man, the Butcher. Like I said earlier, he's in a spot there that I think a lot of people would like freak out if they got that call. It might have been on short notice. I kind of get the feeling it was. Hey, hey, Big Butch, you're going in 90-degree weather against Moxley in the main event, and he's like earlier in the day, probably like at band practice, right? Because this guy's an interesting character. So I think he was just probably game for it, and I think he went out there and did an awesome job. I think he looks like a video game character. And like a weird movie star from a different era, and I liked it. It was cool. Like, I think I might be him for Halloween this year or something. Get the mustache, some attachments on the side, and I might actually like just rock it for the rest of our podcast to differentiate between myself and Mike, because we got two bald guys with beards here
and glasses.
So I'm gonna transition. I'm gonna get something flowing. And maybe a monocle to match my man, the Butch.
Yeah, I agree, man. You need that monocle, man. Next week, I want to see you on the podcast with the monocle. Please, or get one, get that prescription. Yes, that is your guy. But my top performer of the week was Cody. Obviously, he didn't wrestle, but just the heat he brought and the fire he brought on the mic. And it's good to see him back. The EVP, the backbone of AEW, and whoa, I'm ready for it, man. I'm ready for him to be back in the ring every week, and he sacrifices it. He goes all out every week.
Yeah, I think that off of that, Sean, there's a lot of excitement for Brody versus Cody. That's been weeks and weeks in the making. So next week's show certainly looks to be exciting. I don't know if you included Best Friends versus FTR in the Brush of Greatness. I think that's supposed to be next week as well. So in typical Sean and Nate fashion, you might be slighting the best tag team in the world. That's okay. Next week's show does promise to be a great one. It's going to be memorable. You only have a 30-year celebration of one of the GOATs every so often. So between that main event match for the TNT title, and the Jericho celebration, I think there's a lot of reason to tune in next week. So if you guys are good with it, let's wrap this baby up. I think that Nate, take us away, bud.
Yeah, closing segment for me, real quick. He was in an arcade, and there's a guy that came on screen that a lot of people probably aren't familiar with. But I was. So since like college, I've been telling everyone to go watch this documentary called King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters. And it's about these video game players, specifically Donkey Kong, and they're battling for years and years and years. And in that documentary, there's a heel that is like a wrestling character. And it was who you saw in the white suit. His name's Billy Mitchell. He owns his own barbecue sauce company, but he got erased from all of the Twin City records because he was cheating off of an illegal modified motherboard when recording his Donkey Kong videos. So he's like a heel character in the video game world, which is like really hilarious. Go check the documentary out. It's one of my favorites.
Dynamite download. Rap.